Josh Brown, are you to blame for physical sales dying?
Probably, you tell me.
Well, apparently I am as well. Apparently all of us are. As much as we talk about the value of physical video game sales, the latest financial report over on Sony's side points to a disastrous figure as how to, those conversations are actually translating into physical game sales. Because according to an official Sony PlayStation report, physical sales of PlayStation games account for only 3% of their bottom line. It's a drastically low number. However, analyst Daniel Ahmad has followed up with a clarification. Though to me, it doesn't make anything a whole lot better. It's just a different way of folding in all the realities of how these different numbers are reported. On the Sony side, it's 3%. Ahmad says, though, that physical games at 3% is because Sony only recognizes full revenue from first-party games, while it recognizes a lower royalty value from third-party games. This is different for digital games and add-on content, where it recognizes full revenue from both first and third-party content. Ahmad says a more apt comparison is that physical software accounted for 24% of unit sales. While this is still a low percentage, it still means 73 million physical games were sold during the year. At the end of the day, physical continues to decline each year, and as you can tell from the chart that Sony's put out, add-on content and subscriptions are making up a significant part of revenue these days. Now, I have a few other things to throw in here. I find all of this stuff to be incredibly complicated, and most of what everyone's running with is the 3% number, Wolverine. But that is still the talking point. The fact that physical sales, if you go back to 2020, physical sales were making up 6% of Sony's bottom line, so that's halved in the last 5 years, which is the overall talking point. The fact that people just ain't buying physical sale games.
Exactly. Like, I think the delineation between like how much money they're making off physical games and the percentage of overall game sales, how high that percentage is in terms of like who's buying them physically, all point towards the fact that physical games are less lucrative for companies like Sony and are also just declining overall, and people are buying less of them. I think that's the kind of takeaway point, no matter what the data you're looking at. And I think that is unsurprising because, like you said, that has been the trend over the past decade at this point, and physical game sales have been declining massively, and it makes sense for platform holders like Sony because they get to cut people out essentially of the royalty situation when they bring everything over to their platform. They get to take a nice chunk of money from everything that's sold on their platform, be it games, be it add-on content, be it subscriptions or whatnot. So they want people to be buying digital because it benefits them. And I do think that even though a lot of people like myself have gone, right, we used to be ride or die for physical games, and now even like we've kind of gone, okay, we're going to get on board with this digital revolution. We're going to start buying a lot of games digitally. You can blame us, but I don't think that's the whole story, because I do think there has been an overall disincentivization of physical purchases that has made buying physical kind of like a lost art, or far more money than it's worth.
Yeah, man, and it's like there's so many different parts to this conversation, but it's very true that it feels like not the main way to acquire your games now. It feels like the go-to way is digital. Obviously, things are presented so easily on digital storefronts, but so many games that we buy on physical, you put them in, you still have to install a 10 gig update or whatever it is, or maybe in the case of Nintendo right now, there's the ongoing game key card conversation. I say conversation, it's mainly just pointing the finger at Nintendo, going, "What the hell are you guys doing?" Where they're still selling you a physical card, but all that thing is a license to trigger the download on the store itself. That's their attempt at placating the people who would like to have some sort of physical game on their shelf, but they still want the full sale. They still want to be able to get as much money out of that as possible. And also in Nintendo's case, as a member of Ubisoft's Star Wars Outlaws development has said, games run better when they're installed overall, when they're not running off the carts, which I don't know if that transplants over to the PlayStation side, running off a disc versus having the game installed, but there is that part of the conversation as well. But when you come back to digital sales versus physical, that sheer immediacy of being able to download something seems like that's what's winning. Also, to bring in the rest of the pie chart that is part of the Sony report, hardware on the Sony side makes up 24% of sales, up 19% from 2020, but that's because Sony are charging way more for their systems now than they were a few years ago, which again is a bit of an ongoing conversation, but we'll see if that ever changes. Digital software sales account for 20% of revenue, and add-on content / DLC accounts for 29%. the biggest revenue driver of all. Obviously pointing to, you know, whether that's a premium microtransaction sale in a Call of Duty game or an additional DLC pack or whatever it is. If you can get an audience in place and then supplant them with content, that benefits them a lot better.
And that's why Sony will never completely give up on the live service push. Yes, they have kind of backtracked a lot over the past few years. They've cancelled a lot of projects. They aren't going as all in as they initially planned to. Yeah. But because you can make so much revenue through those add-on sales and through microtransactions, they're never going to give up on that completely. They are still probably going to push Marathon to the moon. They're going to still get some of their other studios to try and get another Helldivers 2 style hit, because if you can get something that sells 15 million copies and then brings in that recurring revenue, you can do absolutely kind of crazy numbers. But yeah, I want to go back to what you said there about the likes of game keys and all of these different ways that not just Sony but publishers across the board are pushing you towards digital without maybe you even knowing, to the point where it feels like a bit of a crux to buy physical. You know, look at Xbox right now, and I know we rag on Xbox a lot, but they've kind of just given up selling physical copies of things anyway. Like, we live in a reality where you can get a boxed version of an Xbox game on PlayStation, but you can't buy that Xbox game physical on Xbox, which is just absolutely mad. And then you throw on top of the game keys, you throw on top of the fact that even some discs now only have some of the data on it, and then you have to download everything else anyway. Of course, we're in the era now of SSDs and kind of like specific discs where you have to install these games no matter what. That's fair enough. We kind of made the shift over to that practice with the last generation, but you still want that disc to mean something. You still want that box to mean something, and without even like a manual, with the games essentially just acting as an activation code, with collector's editions that don't come with a physical disc
that was a turning
anymore.
Point. Yeah.
All of these different ways, I just think companies are pushing you out of wanting to buy physical by making it not worth it.
I think it's interesting that you look at limited run games who, you know, get dragged for being extremely expensive, which they are, but they seem to have taken on that bulk of production where it's like, if a game's going to have a big fancy collector's edition, it'll be done through a third party, often limited run games, and they've been able to, you know, make a hell of a business model out of that, especially across the last 5 to 10 years, where they even have pop-up stores where you can go in person and the magic of a physical game that you can go and buy. And I think that's indicative of how much the first parties or the you know, the existing developers or the publisher combos don't want to put these things together. And if they do, like you said, they'll take the game out of it so they can at least retain the licensing side of it through a digital storefront. It does make me think, though, in regards to, you know, physical video game collections, is that just a bygone thing? If you look at the generational side of it and the conversation that Phil Spencer mentioned when you said about Xbox, you know, Spencer was saying that the younger generations, the upcoming generations, they game on their phones, they stream, they play Roblox, they do whatever. They're not that bothered about sticking to a disc or a cartridge. Why isn't it available on my phone? And Spencer had a whole thing when he was talking about cloud streaming and the availability of games on streaming devices, and that's what the younger generations expect, and that's what they've grown up with. And is physical collecting just the thing that we care about?
Maybe I sound like an old fogey, and I'm getting on, I must admit.
If you're getting on, I'm dust.
I love doing that to him. But, you know, you get people like Phil Spencer saying, well, you know, these younger players, they expect things to be digitally. Do they, or have you programmed them to expect that? Are they, you know, are you reaping the rewards of a narrative that you started to lay down 10 years ago, and now when the new generation of gamers come in, they don't know different like we know different. They don't have that experience of, you know, having everything be on that disc, being able to go and trade with your friends, being able to put it in and just have it work without downloading a bunch of updates or even installing part of the game itself from the internet. Like, they only expect that because you've taught them to expect it. It's not something they, you know, 16-year-olds didn't naturally sprout up, Scott, and say, you know what, I've got real thoughts on this physical media thing, and I don't like it, nor does any of my pals. It's like, obviously that taste comes into it, but it's been kind of programmed in to these younger audiences because of the many reasons that we've talked about there, by just saying, well, this is the best way to game because we've made the other half of the coin actively worse.
Yeah, and it is interesting thinking about, like you said, the Xbox approach. There's ongoing conversation. You've got the Sony side, which hasn't necessarily took a stance. You can look at their financial results. You can see how much physical games aren't contributing to their bottom line. On the Xbox side, they've ostensibly just got out ahead of it and just said, look, we're not really doing that many physical games anymore. We're done done with it. We're going to push Game Pass, we're going to push, monthly services, that kind of stuff. Nintendo are like, we'll still give you the physical card so you can enjoy having something to hold, but we're still going to require the download. And I think it's interesting as an ongoing conversation, but is it just that thing of physical games are just going to go the way of not being the standard way to play, and it'll be the likes of Limited Run or whoever that fly the flag? I think it's interesting. And also, just to throw it on the end here, I bought Metal Gear Solid 3 Delta the other week, and I was very excited that game came with a reversible cover.
Yeah!
And you're never going to have that in digital, are you? So,
dude, I recently also bought Mafia: The Old Country physical as well, and Assassin's Creed Shadows, though that got traded in. And I just kind of miss that feeling of, oh, this is a cool product that I own. Yeah. I talk about the disincentivization of physical games through the downloads and stuff like that, but just the act of owning a game feels less good than buying a really expensive, nice Blu-ray. It doesn't feel like a premium product anymore. It feels like a little bit of plastic that has a little disc in, and it's just there you go if you want it. What I love about limited run games and some of the other kind of companies like them, Lost and Cult are great, is that they make these really cool bespoke versions. They make collector's editions of games that are better than the actual collector's editions that come from the people who made them and distributed them. And I think that is indicative of just where we've ended up, where the companies are happy to take your money for collector's editions of physical games, but they're not really all that bothered, or they're not bothered about convincing you to do so. It's there if you want it.
Yeah.